Have you ever finally escaped a narcissist, only for them to suddenly reappear months later? A message appears on your phone, a name you recognize immediately, someone you thought was completely out of your life. Maybe weeks have passed, maybe months, maybe even years. And yet somehow, just when you had finally started moving on, they reach out again. Sometimes the message is simple. Hey, I was thinking about you. Sometimes it sounds emotional. I miss you. And sometimes it sounds almost innocent. I just wanted to see how you're doing. But the moment you see their name, something inside you shifts. Memories return. Confusion returns. And a question begins to form in your mind. Why now? Why come back after everything that happened? For many people who have been involved with a narcissistic partner, this moment is surprisingly common. Psychologists even have a name for this behavior. It is called hoovering. The term comes from the Hoover vacuum cleaner, because in many ways the narcissist is attempting to pull you back into the relationship, back into the emotional cycle. But to understand why narcissists come back, we need to understand how narcissistic relationships often begin. Because the beginning of these relationships is rarely ordinary. In fact, it often feels extraordinary. At the start, the narcissist may appear incredibly charming, attentive, deeply interested in who you are. They listen carefully to your stories. They notice small details about your personality. They may say things that make you feel uniquely understood. Things like, I feel like I've known you forever. You're not like anyone else. I've never connected with someone this way before. Hearing these words can feel powerful, especially if you've spent years hoping to find someone who truly understands you. And this is exactly why the beginning can feel so intense. Psychologists refer to this stage as idealization. During idealization, the narcissist places their partner on a pedestal. You become the center of their attention, the person they admire, the person they want to impress. But this intense admiration is often not about genuine love. Instead, it serves a psychological purpose. It creates a strong emotional attachment very quickly. And that attachment becomes the foundation of the entire cycle. One of the most common ways narcissists create this emotional attachment is through something known as love bombing. Love bombing is when someone overwhelms another person with affection, praise, and attention. In the beginning, communication may feel constant. Messages throughout the day, compliments that seem endless, expressions of admiration that feel almost too good to be true. They may tell you how special you are, how lucky they feel to have met you, how different you are from everyone else. Sometimes the relationship moves forward extremely quickly. Talk of the future appears very early. Plans, promises, even declarations of love. To someone experiencing this attention, it can feel incredibly romantic. It may feel like you have finally met someone who truly sees you. But for many narcissists, the goal of love bombing is not emotional intimacy. The goal is attachment. Once a strong emotional bond forms, the dynamic slowly begins to shift. At first, the changes are subtle. The messages become less frequent. The excitement fades slightly, and small criticisms begin to appear. Comments that make you question yourself. You're being too sensitive. You're overthinking things. You're imagining problems. Individually, these comments may seem minor, but over time they begin to change the emotional atmosphere of the relationship. The person who once made you feel admired now makes you feel uncertain. And this is when the relationship enters the next stage of the narcissistic cycle, the devaluation phase. During the devaluation phase, affection decreases while criticism increases. the emotional stability of the relationship begins to disappear. One day, the narcissist may seem warm and affectionate again, almost like the person you met at the beginning. The next day, they may seem distant, cold, uninterested. This unpredictability creates confusion, and confusion can be psychologically powerful because when something doesn't make sense emotionally, the brain naturally tries to solve the problem. You may start asking yourself questions. What did I do wrong? Why are they acting this way? How can I fix this? Without realizing it, you begin investing more emotional energy into the relationship, trying to restore the connection that once felt so strong, trying to return to the beginning. And this pattern can create something known as a trauma bond. A trauma bond forms when intense emotional highs are mixed with painful emotional lows. Moments of affection are followed by rejection. Moments of closeness are followed by distance. The brain begins to associate relief with the same person who created the distress. And that creates a powerful emotional attachment, even when the relationship itself becomes unhealthy. Eventually, many narcissistic relationships reach another stage, the discard phase. In this phase, the narcissist may suddenly withdraw from the relationship. Communication stops. Messages disappear. Attention vanishes. Sometimes they leave without explanation. Sometimes they leave after blaming their partner for the problems in the relationship. And sometimes they simply disappear. For the person experiencing this, the emotional impact can be overwhelming. You may replay conversations again and again, trying to understand what happened, trying to understand why someone who once seemed so invested suddenly walked away. But from the narcissist's perspective, the relationship often served a very specific psychological purpose. Narcissists rely heavily on something psychologists call narcissistic supply. Narcissistic supply refers to the attention, admiration, validation, and emotional reactions that support a narcissist's sense of identity. In simple terms, narcissists often depend on external attention to regulate their self-esteem. For many people, receiving this message creates intense emotional conflict. Part of you may feel relief. Part of you may feel curiosity. And part of you may remember the early days of the relationship, the affection, the excitement, the connection that once felt real. But if the cycle begins again, the pattern often repeats itself. Idealization, devaluation, discard, and eventually hoovering again. This repeating cycle is what keeps many people trapped in narcissistic relationships for long periods of time. But the cycle can be broken. Psychologists often recommend one of the most effective strategies: no contact. No contact means establishing clear boundaries, no replies, no messages, no continued emotional engagement, because every response provides the narcissist with something they seek: attention, reaction, connection. Without those responses, the cycle slowly begins to lose its power. And over time, something important happens. Clarity returns. The emotional fog begins to lift. You begin to see the relationship more objectively, not as a mysterious love story, but as a repeating psychological pattern. And once you recognize the pattern, something changes. The message that once felt powerful loses its influence because you understand what it really represents. Not love, not destiny, but control. And once you see that clearly, you no longer need to return to the cycle. Instead, you can move forward with clarity, confidence, and emotional freedom. If you found this psychological breakdown helpful, consider subscribing for more insights into human behavior, relationships, and dark psychology.